right. Well, welcome everybody to Beanstalk A&T. I'm Rex. I am I don't know, I'm with the community team, let's say. I'm with the community team here at Beanstalk and kind of settling into my new role. And as part of that role, helping out to run these classes and take a little bit of responsibility off of Dumpling's shoulders. Has been doing this for some time, running these classes. I want to tell you quickly, Dumpling, how much I appreciate the work that you've put in and the amount of time. So happy to help out in this way. So, as we were talking about, if you've got some questions, obviously, I think most folks kind of know how this session works. We'll have Publius kind of kick things off with just, let's say, opening thoughts or any new updates that they want to cover, and then we'll probably kind of kick it over to the group to see if there are any specific questions that want to be covered. Um, we've got a few ways that people can get involved in the meeting. One was what we were just talking about. You can post a question to the class discussion, or you can just request to be brought up on stage, and you can talk about your question or give your question directly. With that, Publius, is there anything you want to particularly cover to get us kicked off tonight?
Just want to say welcome, Rex. Happy to have you.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Actually, so if there is Publius, would it be all right with you? And actually, I got to check who's here. If we've got, oh, we've got is do I see TB? Yeah, TB, you want to talk quickly about the serotonin stuff?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean it's great news. Serotonin is a content and PR and marketing agency really that we've signed today. So the contract is done. The payment's about to go out, and actually it's really cool because they are a vendor who has asked to get paid in beans, which is here's to many more such payments happening globally all over the world, where beans are what is being exchanged in terms of value. So very happy with that. Serotonin is a premium crypto agency. They've worked with several big brands, including like Ampleforth, which is also a stable coin, an algorithmic stable coin. So just very exciting. They've worked with a lot of big brands, and we're very happy to be able to associate and have a partner like that who's functioned at such a high level. And we're going to kick things off this week. I think Thursday is when we have our kickoff call. We're just excited to see, what value they can bring to Beanstalk, and if their client, their past clientele, their performance history is any sign, I think good things are coming. So that's all we'll say about that.
Great stuff. All right. So, without getting too far off into all the different things that are going on in the different groups, so so usually the Beanstalk AMT is set up in something like a Q&A or AMA style. So I want to kick it as quickly as possible out to the group. Any thoughts, questions, anything that the group wants to bring up to talk through with Publius or with another member of the team?
Actually, I'll ask a question while I'm here on stage,
Do it.
Publius. Awesome. I think we'd love to hear, at least I personally love to hear how it's been going, you feel, in terms of the latest ups and downs in terms of ETH and how you think Beanstalk is doing. Just would love to get a general idea of how you think the past month or so has been in your view for Beanstalk.
So, the past month has been, and we, at the risk of sounding like we're shilling, we're not. We're just answering honestly. The past month has been really exciting and a big part of the overall proof of concept for Beanstalk, which is even with ETH generally trending downward, and over the past couple days it's seemed to have broken out of that trend, at least for the time being, the price of a bean has continued to oscillate pretty consistently above and below $1 during this time. And peak to trough, ETH is now down over 40%, or was down over 40%. And despite that, beans really stayed at $1 and stayed oscillating at above and below $1. When you had really short periods of time where ETH would dip a few percent, that did manifest itself in some TWAPs below 99 cents, even in one or two below 98 cents. But in general, between converts and arbitrageurs that seem to be maintaining the peg at a decent rate, there was not a lot of volatility in the bean price as compared to the ETH markets or crypto markets in general. And that's very exciting. Now, the thing that I would look at as the other major thing to keep an eye on is Beanstalk doesn't just optimize around price, it also optimizes around debt level. And the fact that we've seen the debt level start to stabilize significantly since January 1, it's the rate at which the pipeline has been increasing has decreased significantly, and that continues to flatten out. And despite ETH continuing to come down. So in general, you would expect during a market drawdown, the Beanstalk debt level might have to increase, but that has not even been the case. So just in general, an exciting couple of weeks from a proof of concept for Beanstalk. That's not to say that everything is made, certainly not, but it is important to just take a little bit of a step back and appreciate when things are going well, and the past month is certainly a meaningful data point on the in the grand scheme of things.
Awesome, thank you.
All right. Thank you, TB. So we've got a question in the chat from Silo Chad. Said he just saw that the gauge proposal went out and is wondering what the timeline is from here.
So the next steps will be in the next couple of hours. We're hopefully going to ping or drop some messages in the relevant Discord communities, the Curve DAO, the Convex DAO, Yearn, Stake DAO, and if anyone else has any other relevant ideas for DAOs that have large influence in the Curve gauge that we should reach out to, let us know. I don't believe there are any others. But basically we're going to let everyone know that this proposal draft is live, and then we're going to wait a couple days to see if there's any comments or anything that needs to get changed or added. And then at that point, Beanstalk Farms is going to formally propose on chain to have the pool added to the gauge. And at that point, we'll see how the vote goes. Now, there have been, for the most part, not a lot of hiccups for protocols getting added to the gauge, but we're not going to count any chickens until that happens. So after that happens, that's where things get very exciting. So if the pool is added to the gauge, at that point, LP token holders for the Bean3 curve pool will be able to choose between earning gauge rewards and earning stock and seed rewards from Beanstalk. However, in the meantime, while this is ongoing, Beanstalk Farms is working on another BIP that will facilitate effectively the deposit of convex Bean3 curve into the silo, such that you'll be able to receive both Beanstalk and boosted curve rewards via convex at the same time. And so that is like the next step in the next step in the silo generalization is convert and minting. But the next thing beyond that will be the convex boosted rewards. And that'll be done in a general way such that the silo facilitates a reward distribution for a variety of different assets. So that's that's what the timeline looks like for the next month plus, let's call it, on the curve integration.
So would you go into just a little bit more detail on that convert and mint component?
Sure. So the roadmap talked a lot about the continued generalization of the silo and also the generalization of the minting schedule. So the silo generalization has to happen in steps, but one step that it's important to happen in conjunction is two steps that are important to happen in conjunction with one another from an economics perspective is that when generalized minting goes live, such that any pool could be added to the minting schedule. In this case, it'll start with the Bean3 curve pool. We want to make sure that there's conversions allowed within the silo for that liquidity pool. So right now, converts only work for the Bean ETH Uniswap V2 pool within the silo, but obviously we want to generalize that to support any LP tokens or any assets that are in the silo in a modular fashion, such that you'll be able to go from deposited LPA to deposited LPB to deposited beans to deposited token C, potentially without any loss of stock or with minimal loss of stock. And so that will continue to, I almost said create a silo effect within the silo, but it's aptly named, right? It will create reasons for assets to remain within the silo. Now, the reason the minting and convert need to happen in tandem is that if you have minting without convert, then we kind of go back to a world where convert doesn't necessarily exist. And you could roll out convert beforehand, but it's also weird to have convert in a pool that minting doesn't actually take place on, particularly at this stage of the game where there's only one other pool being added to the silo. So in the future, we may not want that to be the case for every pool. Like pools that you can convert within may not be a minting pool per se. But in this case, given the current size of Beanstalk, it makes sense for them to happen at the same time. So that's one of the next BIPs that are, from a structural perspective in the works. Now, the next BIP that is probably going to go live, and this is actually more of a change, of course. So in the past, there's been a lot of questions about the weather, and we've very much pushed back on the idea that there should be any short-term fixes to the weather as opposed to waiting to figure out a more general solution to measuring demand for soil, and then however that might affect the weather changes in general. I'd say a couple things. One, we've found that figuring out the optimal system for measuring demand for soil to be particularly complex to get right. But as we've gotten closer and closer to what a system might look like, it's become evident that that system will resemble in practice, if not in theory, what a Band-Aid solution to the current weather might look like. And the specific Band-Aid would just be to change within the weather changes that pesky one, which is in the, I guess the coordinate would be, if you're looking at figure 11, the coordinate is 2, -1. So decelerating towards ideal equilibrium with excessively high debt, which is the case where the price is greater than 1, but there's decreasing demand for soil, which just to state it explicitly, that's the case that we're experiencing quite often where the price is above 1, but because the price is above 1, there's not sufficient soil available for anyone to sow because of gas fees. And accordingly, again, without getting into too many specifics on where the demand for soil measurement might go, the point is that it's become evident that changing the 1 to a 0, even though it's not the most elegant solution, is in the long run probably a good thing to do and gets us closer to what a final model might look like. And so with that in mind, I think in the next couple days, we're inclined to submit a BIP to change that 1 to a 0. And this is a little bit of just train of thought, but was just talking about the upcoming BIPs. So thought this was relevant to mention that, this is obviously something we've talked about in class multiple times over a period of weeks and months, this is, it's important to constantly be optimizing in real time. And I think as we've continued to study the weather, it makes sense for us to make this shorter term change, given that even if it's not perfect, it's in the direction of where the evolution of the system is likely going to go.
Now, I appreciate that. What it makes me think of is getting, moving away from having that, to use your term, that pesky that 1% increase. It almost seems to be saying that when the protocol wants to increase the weather, that the circumstances under which it will increase the weather are a little bit more definitive, and then the change in the weather itself will in turn be more definitive, kind of in tandem, if I'm following.
Yeah, and so just to be clear, the goal is to create an efficient market for soil. And that primary goal does appear to have been achieved, right? The Beanstalk is issuing the right amount of soil, at least in our opinion, and that's manifested itself in a flattening of the pod rate over the past 2 months since BIP 9. And the question becomes, okay, now that you're measuring and you have an efficient demand, you have an efficient market for soil, how can you actually measure demand for soil properly? And that's a very tricky problem, because there's this minimum threshold, and it's unclear what exactly that minimum is, below which it's not cost effective to sow, just because there's too many fees, not enough upside, and not enough soil. The problem is that as soon as you hard code or come up with some sort of way that it's easy for everyone to calculate in real time what that threshold is, you're basically going to encourage people to sow all but 0.00001 beans up to that threshold, such that the weather will still be increasing or read a negative, read a decreasing, read a whatever the thing you're trying to measure is. It will be a false measurement in practice, because you're defining some explicit threshold that everyone can avoid. And if you're the first person to sow and your transaction goes through first, and you sow just above that threshold or just below, however you want to think about it, that immediately creates the same incentive issue that caused everyone to not sow before. So we're kind of back to square one. So that's why this is non-trivial to fix in reality, but exactly as you're saying, this is in that spirit.
All right. So next we've got a question in the chat from Austin, and he says, I've heard on a couple occasions Publius say that it would only take 1 to 2 million of capital into Beanstalk to kickstart another growth cycle. Do you think that this is still true? And could you talk about why that's the case?
So I don't know if I've said that before, Austin. That may be a little bit of a misquote, but if I said it, I'd be curious where exactly. But with that said, I think the thing to put it into context, what we've spoken about is in the past, like the November growth cycle was kickstarted by only about $1 million of capital that came into Beanstalk very quickly. Now, with that said, there was only the Bean-ETH Uniswap V2 pool at the time. There were no converts at the time, and there was much less liquidity in the pool at the time. And so I think the system could handle $1 million of demand. And again, that was $1 million of demand for soil. So that's a lot of demand for beans in terms of raw demand. I don't think, especially given that there's not that much soil at the moment, that we're likely to see, let's say, $1 million of 3 curve were added to the pool tomorrow. I don't think that would kickstart a major growth cycle, but it is likely to increase the rate that beans are paid out to stockholders and pods start to get harvested, and it's more likely to have the price of beans start to trade on average above 1, as opposed to over the past month, even though we've been oscillating above and below 1. It's the price has been on average below 1. I'm making that up, but that would be my guess just from paying attention to the market. And so where you would start to see the $1 million have an effect is that uh, the APYs, even though they're not being shown at the moment, the APYs would probably go up pretty substantially. And at that point, you may have more demand come in thereafter because the system has started to grow a little bit faster. But I would just, if I've said it in the past, that may have been true at the time, but in Beanstalk's current state with the amount of liquidity out there in the curve pool and converts live in the Uniswap pool, I would say we're closer to $5 million to $10 million of total demand to kickstart a larger growth cycle. Now, maybe $1 to $2 million if it came in a short period of time would be enough to bring in more capital. But we are at a place where Beanstalk could take in $1 million to $2 million of demand pretty seamlessly, I think. So that's where we're at as a protocol.
That's good. And what goes through my mind is it seems like we are kind of teetering or going back and forth in terms of the folks that are in the pod line, thinking about, man, what could spark that, if we hop into our real short-term wayback machine, going back to, like, let's say November when that last growth cycle did happen, and thinking about, man, I want to say that we were seeing, what was it, half a million pods harvested a day, maybe even more. And I think there are a lot of folks that are thinking, are we going to see those numbers at some point again in the near future? And, like, it's been really interesting to watch. What goes through my mind is mental ways when the TWAP's just above $1, when it's $1.50 to see, you know, almost 10,000 pods that are minted, or I should say harvested. And I think a lot of folks are saying, okay, what are the circumstances under which, we're seeing hourly, hourly seasons where, we're seeing 10, 15,000 pods harvested again. And I think that might be part of what Austin's getting at too, is that seeing that in the past and thinking
Got
about
it.
what happens in the future.
Yeah, I think from that perspective, getting the generalized minting going in the curve pool is going to be a big step in that direction. So not sure if people noticed, but maybe an hour ago, someone bought like 500,000 pods on the pod marketplace, and they bought 40,000 beans on curve to facilitate that. And so for a couple minutes, there was like a 60,000 excess on curve and a 20,000 excess on Uniswap. And I don't think that lasted the whole hour. But the point is that would have been a season where 40,000 beans were minted if that lasted for the whole TWAP. And again, I think especially given that Beanstalk hasn't seen any major inflows over the past couple weeks, despite ETH taking a trail off. At some point, and again, if $1 million came into the system, I think we would see much more TWAPs along those lines. That's where incorporating the curve pool into the minting schedule becomes really interesting. So it's probably a combination of getting some more capital in the door and continuing to upgrade Beanstalk. Like right now, even if you had a huge excess in the curve pool, talk a 250,000 excess in the curve pool, you're not going to have that much minting because of the Uniswap pool is where minting happens. And because of arbitrage opportunities between the curve pool and the Uniswap pool is probably maxed out at $1.03, $1.04, unless you're starting to get real excesses in the curve pool. So that's where I guess you'd say real shortages of beans in the curve pool. So that's where I think things get interesting.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's almost this kind of interesting dichotomy within, at least within myself. I don't want to generalize to say within other farmers or folks. You see being performed so well in the peg, and I'm watching this as days go through and as seasons go by, and it's within it's 99.5, 99.7, $1.10, and it's awesome to watch. And at the same time, you're thinking, at some point we're going to deleverage, and like those two almost competing thoughts, like knowing that for serious deleveraging, you're probably going to be in a situation where you're going to get quite a bit above peg for a certain period of time. And so you've got kind of these competing thoughts racing through your mind as you're watching the price trend.
Yeah, that's like the double-edged sword of the converts, right? On the one hand, it helps when you're below peg, but on the other hand, when you're above peg, there is a little bit of a tragedy of the commons where if no one converted, that would cause more minting. But at the same time, that's by design, right? Like
Yeah.
the goal is to have so I call it a tragedy of the commons, a little tongue in cheek, but that was exactly what you were alluding to, right? Like there's a little bit of that desire for the price to run up, but at the same time, that's the beauty of generalizing minting, such that you could even, if let's say the A parameter starts to increase in the pool and liquidity increases in the curve pool, you could have hundreds of thousands of beans minted with the price a tenth of a cent above $1 potentially. So that's where things get very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think everybody's looking forward to that, and yeah, it's big things are coming. Not to misquote Beethoven, who, yes, I do see him in the crowd. All right, we've got a couple folks that are typing into the chat. All right, I just got outbeaned. So, outbeaned says, in your opinion, how has the pod marketplace performed? What's the next step in the marketplace, or what's the next step for the marketplace or pods?
Well, the performance of the market is a little hard to qualify other than to say it's working. And there have been lots of beans exchanged or pods exchanged. And that's really cool. One thing that we were super excited about upon launch is seeing how the pricing curve for pods would ultimately form. And that's just been very exciting to watch. Now, in terms of next steps, so getting a V1 or a V0, whatever you want to call it, of the pod marketplace up, the farmers market up, was great. But there's a lot that can be done to improve the efficiency of the market going forward. And a lot of that was highlighted in the roadmap. Now, without getting into too many weeds, I think the biggest one is allowing for listings and orders to use a dynamic pricing curve, such that you'll be able to say, when I list my pods at any place in the line, here's what they should be priced as based on a formula. And you'll be able to place bids as a dynamic pricing curve as well. And that will tremendously improve the liquidity and efficiency of the market. Now, in terms of timeline on that front, Bean Joyer, who led development on the initial pod marketplace, is working now part-time to work on that. And then Maltese is also working on the pod marketplace. They're trying to figure out the best way to implement the listing and order pricing as functions in Solidity in an efficient fashion, which is non-trivial. And so that's kind of where that's at the moment, but there's a lot of thought going into implementing that upgrade. And there are a variety of other minor tweaks as well, like being able to buy multiple listings in the same transaction and things like that. But that's neither here nor there at the moment.
Good stuff. I'd be interested to know, and it seems like we've got the history um, of things like repricing. Folks that are putting pods under the marketplace, leaving them there for some time, and saying, "Okay, I think I need to change the price to to either to get closer to a sale or to to achieve some specific goal." That's one of the things that floats through my head is how often are people making changes to what they're offering, either offering to for a sale price or a purchase price.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that isn't easily displayed on the UI, and so it's a little hard to track other than from bot. But yeah, that's been interesting to follow as well. I don't have as many insights on that as I might like, just as a function of I don't think we have that data super easily accessible. The other data I would be interested in looking at is like a history of clearing prices and how that's changed over time. But that's also displaying all this data in a user-friendly fashion is non-trivial.
Yeah. All right, we got a couple folks typing. It's Syncubate and Twins fan. So I will invite. Oh, Dumpling's up. Dumpling, anything you want to share? Dumpling,
Dumpling just wanted to come hang out.
yeah, I mean that's cool.
Totally cool, Dumpling.
That's right. All right, so Twins fan just put into the chat. Publius, you've stated that to get more opportunities to share Beanstalk, or it's. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, let me start over again. Publius has started to get more opportunities to share Beanstalk in the larger DeFi community. Is this through a larger interest in the project? So, you want to just talk us through a little bit about how about you talk us through a little bit about some of the different things you've been appearing on, podcasts, stuff like that.
Wow, that might be the most on-the-spot question we've been asked since launching Beanstalk. Like, who have we been talking to? Man, I don't know. A little more seriously, I don't think I can speculate or answer as to the cause of this. Is this through a larger interest in the project? That's presumably one of the reasons. I would also shout out the biz dev team, particularly Syncubate, who's just, and also Bean Merchant, but Syncubate's just like guerrilla warfare out there, making incredible connections with great communities. And a couple of examples as we were in the Tally Wallet Discord chat last week, and that was a really cool community. We did a podcast with Brad at Mission DeFi last week, which I think just dropped this week, and we've been participating in, like, I think we're going to be able to be on DeFi Dave's podcast soon. So there's a variety of different newer opportunities. We're going to be in a Fiat DAO Twitter Spaces tomorrow. There's definitely a lot more opportunities recently to get the word out there. I don't know how much of that is a function of like being larger versus the protocol demonstrating its ability to withstand downside volatility and people noticing or being forced to pay attention a little bit more. But regardless of the cause, it's very exciting, and we're trying to take full advantage of that by, putting our best foot forward and, showing up where the biz dev team tells us to, and the marketing team tells us, to go. And we feel like we're in really good hands with Maxo and Syncubate leading the way on biz dev, and TB and JWW and Mod leading the way on the marketing front. There's a lot of really exciting stuff happening. So from an exposure perspective, I think, yeah, it's noticeable, right? It's noticeable that more people are starting to pay attention and take Beanstalk seriously. So we're just going to continue to try to do our best to represent Beanstalk, and we're grateful that we have the opportunity to continue to go out there and talk about it. So it's very special.
So I'll give you a personal follow-up. When Publius was starting, okay, so thinking back about Mission DeFi podcast, I think talked about how Publius started up a couple Thanksgivings ago. Did it go through your collective minds that, a year and a handful of months after, that you would be spending as much time as you are doing things like podcasts and the more, I'm gonna use the term outward facing, work? Or was that something that you had, seen on the horizon, or was it more of a surprise? Or
Yeah, this is where this is at is totally surreal, and to claim any sort of foresight on that front would be ridiculous. I would say it does feel in many ways like, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing in the grand scheme of things. So it's like, while and we kind of joke about it internally, like, I don't know if spending a couple hours every week recording podcasts is like the best use of my time, as opposed to writing the white paper or trying to work on the Gitbook documentation or trying to figure out how to measure demand for weather or the multi-chain architecture, or there's a million things to work on. But at the end of the day, uh, you know, I think one of the lines that we quoted in that original Mission DeFi podcast is, the only reward for hard work is more work. And so ultimately, I don't know if this is where we thought we would be, put now it's 15 months ago, 16 months ago. But we're certainly grateful for it. And it's one of those, when we decided to kind of dive all in. And originally that night we thought we'd do like an ESD fork or something. It was originally we were spitballing, right? But once we decided to dive all in and try to make this as amazing as humanly possible, or at least that we could make it possible. Yeah, I don't know if it's like this is where we thought we would be, but the point is we're just very grateful to be here and very excited for the opportunity to continue to work on Beanstalk every waking minute and also in my dreams. It's like, so that's it's a good place to be.
Man, I feel like there's one of Beethoven's next tracks, something about dreaming about beans. Oh wait,
Yeah.
actually, now that I think about it, he's got a line. There's a line in one of the songs. There's a field full of beans. I can see it in my dreams. Maybe that's where I'm just tapping into it.
So if anything, I mean, after pausing there, the one thing I would comment that's a total mind fuck, it really is mind blowing, is that we have compelled so many amazing individuals, a lot of whom are hanging out here in class today, to work on Beanstalk in some capacity and to spend their time trying to make Beanstalk a reality. And that is where I know for us individually, it's very meaningful and rewarding and surreal to be surrounded by a bunch of people that love this thing that, while we created it, it's certainly not ours at this point. It's everyone's. And that's I mean, that is the thing that I think is most stunning or surreal, as opposed to recording podcasts. Like, as I'm sure you can tell, Rex, I can talk all day. So uh, put me on a podcast or that's where I'm talking is less important than the people I'm talking to, and to be talking uh, I mean, having calls every day with people that are really spending all of their brain power to make Beanstalk as great as possible. That is surreal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so it's funny. I find myself watching Twitter feeds a lot. Definitely now more in DeFi than ever before, and specifically watching what people are saying about Beanstalk that aren't part of this, kind of core group. Trying to figure out what people in general, how they perceive the protocol, and I'm trying to think. I'd have to look to see who it was, but some random person on Twitter talked about the community, and maybe they're a more integral part of the community, under a different pseudonym or something else, but it didn't seem like it based on just the way that they wrote the tweet, and it was extremely complimentary to the community itself, and as part of the community team, like that is like, to me, aside from having a really technically strong protocol and some really solid, economic philosophy, to say, hey, like this is a group of individuals that are genuinely great to be around. I mean, that's like, you don't see that in a lot of other, really organizations in general, cryptocurrency, DeFi, in particular, it seems like there's a lot of folks that are looking to kind of get rich quick or, find out ways that they can take advantage of systems, but this community is excellent.
Yeah, I think I saw that tweet too, and it put more than like I mean, it put a smile on our face, but it's more than that. It's like this is the best sign. The community and the quality, that's the best sign that this is real and that Beanstalk has a bright future ahead of it potentially. Where it's, if anything, going back to like our thoughts a couple Thanksgivings ago, the thing about ESD was that it was really neat and unique, but ultimately was very clearly like a pump and dump isn't the right thing, but it was very clearly manipulated, right? It was a system that from the get-go was manipulated in a fashion that made it very difficult for anyone to actually uh, like invest in it in the long run. And that stemmed from the fact that the debt coupons were all fungible, which really disproportionately rewarded whales, to the fact that the the minting schedule was predefined. And so the earlier you were in, no matter what, the better you did. And though, like when we made core decisions about how to structure Beanstalk, the fact that it worked out, right? Like it was the decision to go kind of the opposite of the VC route and sell anything in advance or do any like we very easily could have done that. The fact that now we're here and surrounded by amazing people, it's very notable. It's very notable. So the fact that the community is getting shout outs on Twitter is like, yeah, that's really awesome.
Really is. I keep seeing Outbeamed typing or get a message on my phone, which I'm watching as I'm on my computer here too. I just want to make
What are
sure
you
that
doing, Outbeamed? Come
we're
on,
not missing.
Outbeamed. Yeah, what's going on here?
You want to hop up, Outbeamed? Oh no, we got like 4 or 5 people typing now. J Dubs, Austin, and Outbeamed.
It's a
Many
party.
up.
We value
Always,
decisiveness. That's good, Austin.
always welcome on the stage. All right, Austin says we value decisiveness in this community. Outbeamed, you're getting called out.
All right, I'll be typing again. Allegedly.
Yep.
Allegedly.
All right, Outbeamed says, what do you think about local farmers? You might have to be a little bit more specific, Outbeamed, because I live in a place where there are a lot of local farmers. You talk about local farmers here, or how do we continue to keep them in silo? Okay, all right. So basically, if I'm understanding what you're asking, Outbeamed, um, how do we? The question is, how do we continue? So when we have let's call them like relatively passive observers or new members of the community, how do we pull them in and make them or help incentivize them to become more involved? Is that it seems like that's what you're getting at. What do you think, Publius? I've got a couple thoughts if you want to go first.
Yeah, I think here they clarified how do we keep them engaged?
Yep.
I mean, ultimately, that is, I mean, not to put you on the spot, Rex, but this is why we're so excited to have you starting to lead the community, or the community department within Beanstalk Farms might be the better way to say it, where making sure that when people have questions or people want to understand what's happening with the Omniscia audit or what's like, we have active representation that can, in a complete way, make sure that people feel responded to and included, even if they're not, um, actively working on Beanstalk, which again, not everyone can work on Beanstalk. Some people want to just use it, and that's totally cool too. So I think having high quality communication and high quality documentation that's the name of the game on that front.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I would follow up, and it's funny because this is a question you asked me a couple weeks ago when we were first talking about the community role, and I was still wrapping my head around it as well. And I guess now, with a little bit of hindsight, I can probably give you a better answer than I could then. But the first thing that goes through my mind is, and something you hinted at, it's the idea that making sure that people are listened to, I feel like, is the first step, especially if they are relatively new and have questions about the protocol. I don't think anybody here is fooled about the level of complexity here. In fact, it's something that we talk about a lot in different spaces, be it on Twitter or in the Discord. There's a lot of complexity here, and so to be able to have you know new or somewhat passive members of the community, if they have questions, to be able to respond to them, and in if nothing else, making people feel like they have been heard and not ignored, is kind of a first step. The other thing that goes through my mind about managing that engagement is trying to find ways that individuals feel like they are comfortable in terms of increasing their involvement, and not just saying, well, here's the boxes we have. If you don't fit the box, sorry. But to be able to, to say to, or even more so, to be intuitive about how we interact with individuals and find out what their strengths and weaknesses and interests are, in finding ways to help them use those strengths and interests to be more engaged and to find a place and to be supportive as that process happens, knowing that it doesn't always work quite right the first time. Sometimes the first thing you do isn't quite the right fit, but there's opportunities to learn and grow, and there's going to be a support system for individuals along the way, no matter what their level of involvement is. So hopefully that's a better answer than I gave you a few weeks back.
Awesome, Rex. Really awesome. So, I mean, how lucky are we to have you? So,
Go on.
So the I mean, only thing to add there is, I think that the key difficulty will be as the community starts to scale and we add a 0 to the number of Discord members. How can we make sure that the purity is maintained to some extent? And it's not to say it'll all be maintained. There will be the good old days where the Discord was A plus, but for now, we can enjoy it while it lasts and take precautions and prepare for what hopefully is a larger inflow of people.
Yep, that's very fair. Yeah, I have another thought, but I'd rather get to. So J Dubs dropped a question into the chat, and I want to go through that and make sure that we get it. So J Dubs says, with regards to exploits and manipulations, Publius, can you talk a little more to any core concerns you see for the protocol over the next 30 to 60 days that can be remedied, specifically in light of the ESD experience that you just mentioned?
I mean, over the next 30 to 60 days, probably not. All of the main lessons from ESD were implemented in the original Beanstalk, and we probably didn't learn enough lessons, as reflected in the fact that, for example, the minimum soil was originally a function of the total bean supply. That was like a leftover thing from the ESD model, even though not directly, just the thought process behind the ESD model. And I think at this point, nothing related to ESD or inspired by that is relevant to Beanstalk. We'll just use this chance to shout out the Omniscia audit, which, we did get back a preliminary report. At this point, there have been a couple BIPs since then, so the code has changed, but feeling pretty good about that. And so gonna try to, it's difficult to marry getting all of the changes done in a version of the code that, at the same time that we're pushing new code. So trying to figure out the best way to marry that at the moment. Frankly, having a little bit of difficulty managing that with Omniscia, but we're trying to figure it all out here. So that would be that from a vulnerability perspective, the fact that the audits are coming, or the first audit is the initial report is done, and that's encouraging. So don't have anything based on ESD per se in this case.
All right. So Austin has another item, and he says, "I'm probably not thinking about this correctly, but humor me anyway. Does generalized convert functionality reduce the value proposal? I'm going to say that's proposal of a protocol integrating with the silo to create a black hole for their token or LP token?"
I think it actually works in the opposite direction. So let's say that there are all these deposited beans in the silo that people want to take advantage of. So if I have token X and I want to fund or incentivize liquidity in a Bean X pool, what I can do is lots of pod exchanges happening now. Oh, wow, that's cool. But what I can do is I can take the asset that I have and then convert deposited beans into LP with that asset, assuming that those LP tokens are also in the silo. And so what you're basically going to be able to do is take advantage of all of the deposited beans that are in the silo as liquidity against your other token, for example. And so that's it kind of works in the opposite direction, where the generalized convert is actually what facilitates that black hole for their token.
All right. So, a couple other questions. So I'm going to ask you first. I'm going to ask just a quick point of clarification. We do the hour, right? Or you all right with going over? Or
Yeah, we can always run a couple minutes longer, no problem. If there are questions, we can keep answering them.
cool. All right, because I'm seeing two in the chat. One is from Bean Bankman Refried, and he says, "I've noticed some confusion with the farms in our branding." Okay. "I've noticed some confusion with the farms in our branding, misleading people to think of us as a typical yield farm, which could be off-putting for some people that don't yield farm. Thoughts on branding changes to put the stable more in the forefront and not leading with the farm? For example, Beanstalk for the Beanstalk Farms Twitter handle." So essentially clarifying between what Beanstalk does and a more
Yeah.
typical yield farming DeFi scenario.
Well, so the other thing to clarify is Beanstalk Farms is the development organization, and it's really like it's not necessarily the best name. So what I would just say on this front is making sure that we have a clear brand is essential, but I am not the guy to talk about this. So D's Beans is the guy to talk about this, or to talk to about this. So not sure if D's, you wanted to hop up here and answer that, or if maybe you just want to address it at another time, if you're not in front of a mic or whatever. But D's is leading the branding department, and this is obviously essential that we have a strong first impression. And so I don't think that this is the point that you're raising, being Bankman refried, is important. And I think that there probably is a decent amount of confusion around the Beanstalk Farms name. And so, yeah, everything is up for consideration for improvement, is what I would say.
Deez will give you a second to hop up if you want. There he is. Go ahead, Deez. Floor is yours.
Hey, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, certainly can.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's definitely something that we've been thinking about a lot in the past month and a half, 2 months, is just working with Beanstalk. So I think the Publius, they set it up really nicely where Beanstalk is the DAO, right? It's all the people who own stock And
Well,
again,
Beanstalk's the protocol. The Beanstalk
right.
DAO is separate. That's the silo technically.
And you're right. Right now is probably the best time to be absolutely specific on that. So thank you for that further clarification. But yeah, and so that's Beanstalk DAO. And then Beanstalk Farms is separate from Beanstalk DAO, just as Publius was mentioning. And I think the reasoning for that, and of course, this is another thing that Publius, please, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's just so that we can have a place to develop Beanstalk, the protocol, in a quick fashion, and having the DAO support and govern on chain Beanstalk Farms. And as we do the branding, especially as we push out the new branding for the website, we're hoping to have specific branding for Beanstalk Farms and then just Beanstalk itself. But yeah, those are definitely different, and hopefully, just as you said, we'll definitely brand those differently on the Twitter.
Yeah, and even maybe changing the name of Beanstalk Farms makes sense.
Yeah, maybe you could say there's no sacred cows at Beanstalk Farms, so including the name.
Yeah. Probably can't change the name of Beanstalk the protocol, but beyond that, I mean, Dee's convinced us to change the logo, right? So it's like, like we're very open-minded.
He started talking about the golden ratio and Fibonacci. I was thoroughly entranced. Good stuff. Good stuff coming from Dee's and team.
Yeah, I was quite impressed by Publius and how willing they were to go along with the revamp. But that's definitely a good point, and maybe that's something that we could even ask pull up to the DAO is if they might think, or if we all might think that Beanstalk Farms, we just want to change that as well, because we definitely can, and that'd be to figure out that, and like the naming of that is definitely now before we do the rebranding or apply it. So that's definitely an open discussion.
All right. Next, so we've got Bean Counter, who asks, is it possible to release the Omniscia report when it's completed and vulnerabilities are addressed? And says in parentheses, it's okay if not, if they have some sort of restrictions or NDA.
Yeah, so the hope is for something definitely to be published. I'm going to tread very lightly with my comments here, but the short answer is, over the past couple of weeks, while the retainer fundraiser has been filling, we've been a little bit disappointed with the back and forth with Omniscia, just trying to get the latest BIPs updated and getting to a point where all the code will be updated. And so we're thinking about trying to get them to publish a report saying that the initial audit that they did, we fixed those changes, while acknowledging that Beanstalk has since changed, because getting them to audit all of the changes may end up being too much for them. And, that would obviously change the strategy around the fundraiser and whether that should continue. But I don't think we want to have that conversation necessarily just yet. But there is a little bit of ambiguity as to what exactly we're going to end up getting published from Omniscia, just because I think there is a little bit of friction at the moment where, we don't want to speak poorly about anybody, but yeah, just trying to make sure that we're getting what the DAO signed up for, and not getting not getting anything less.
It's very fair. So I guess now, understanding there's some friction, I don't want to necessarily belabor the point, but I guess what runs through my mind is, with that thought in mind,
And there's no friction around the contents of the audit, I would just say.
yeah,
The
yep,
audit itself is
yep,
like that if anything would be the place where we're like, yeah, that's all good. So it's more around like we're pushing code so frequently, it's a little bit difficult for I think for them to keep up, and that's causing the problems, is what I would say.
gotcha. So does the retainer solve that?
Well, that was what we had hoped the retainer was going to solve, but it's like that's what in practice has been a little bit disappointing. So that's what we're trying to figure out. It's like
Yeah.
unclear.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah, and
So looking
again,
through,
this is like we feel very much an obligation to be transparent with everyone, and so it's one of those things where obviously suboptimal, but it is what it is.
very fair. All right, looking through the class discussion, looks like we've got some kind of follow-up comments, but no new questions. So I'll throw it out as a final opportunity. Looks like TB hopped up. TB, what can we do for you?
Well, I had a quick question. Could you speak a little bit to our possible integration with Fiat DAO and sort of the effects of that on Beanstalk and kind of the potential for that partnership a little bit?
Yeah, so I think we'll be speaking a lot more substantively about it tomorrow in the Fiat DAO Twitter Spaces, which we'd encourage everyone to come hang out in. But at its surface, what Fiat DAO would enable is the ability to take out a loan against your pods. So effectively, you'd be able to lend assets to Beanstalk and then take out a loan against the debt, which is really cool. So, needless to say, when we talk about Beanstalk becoming a core financial primitive within DeFi, having the ability to take your pods and take out leverage against them is a major step in that direction. So, the hope is for all of the assets within Beanstalk to eventually be depositable in other protocols and potentially used for leverage, but using Fiat DAO for zero coupon bonds, which is what they specialize in, is really awesome because it would enable pods. So that's what we'll be talking a little bit more about with them tomorrow. And yeah, that's another really cool example of some sort of validity from other protocols in addition to Afra Finance, which is launching a Bean integration soon, where other protocols are starting to take Bean seriously. Beanstalk.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, we're a couple minutes over on the hour, so I'll open it up one more time for anybody from the floor. Anything to drop last minute into the chat? Okay, seeing and hearing nothing. Always appreciate everybody's time. Publius, appreciate your time. Always great questions. Thank you so much for coming along and hanging out with us this evening. And yeah, we'll let everybody go. And I think we'll see a lot of you here probably Thursday night. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks.